This is week 10 of the winter trimester. I'm Jennifer Marie and this is my Atelier Diary. Before I get into what I did this week, I wanted to share with you a workshop that's happening this summer. It's taking place at my atelier in Chicago, and Magda, who's one of my instructors, she's running it and I'm going to be assisting her. She's still getting everything worked out, but I'll share with you what I know so far, and then when I get more information, I'll share that as well. Okay, so the workshop, it's split into two. You can either take one part or both of the parts. The first part is a 2-week drawing course, and then the second part is a 4-week painting course. It's already filling up pretty quickly. I think there's more slots open for the drawing portion of it, but I think for the painting portion, I think there's only 2 or 3 spots left. So if anyone's interested, make sure you let me know as soon as possible so I can get you more information, and then you can secure your spot if you want it. The 2-week drawing course is going to be Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to noon. And the 4-week painting course is going to be 4 days a week, and the same time, it'll be 9 a.m. till noon. And my followers will get 15% off their tuition. So the drawing course is originally $700, but if you mention me, that'll only be $595. The painting course originally is $1,800, but 15% off of that will be $1,530. And then if you want to do both courses, it'll be $2,500, but then again, the 50% off of that would be $2,125. So that's a pretty good deal. So I'll put all the information, what I just said, in the description box down below, and then I'll also put my email address. So if anyone has any questions or anything, just feel free to ask me, whatever. And like I said, once I get more information on the class, I'll let everyone know as soon as possible. You probably want to know the dates too. So the dates are going to be July 10th through August 18th. Okay, now for my Atelier Diary. So this is the 10th week, and usually we only have 10 weeks in a trimester, but we have one more week after this, and that's because with that fiasco that happened with one of our models that walked out on us and us trying to get a replacement model, we've just added another week to give us more time with the long pose. So on Monday, I finished up my color study of Michel, and this color study was 4 days long. So I'll go over all the days really quick and show you the images that go with it. So the first day on this, I had my scrap of canvas, and I was just working on getting the gesture and proportions of Michel, and I was doing this with using the shadow color and the background. Second day, I pretty much just did the same thing. I wasn't totally happy with the gesture and proportions. I felt like I could make it stronger, so I really worked on the gesture and proportions and still used up the same paint mixtures, which was the shadow and the background. And I don't know if I had a dark halftone too, or if I just scumbled the shadow to make a darker halftone to get a more naturalistic look to it. And then I started the color study part of it, where I was working in the lights. And so working with the lights, I was trying to find the biggest areas of color that I could, trying to show the biggest planes of color without breaking it up too much. Matt was talking me with this to not so much be thinking about fitting in an arm and then the chest and the legs and all the parts of him, but more think of it in really huge planes. So really just going down the whole top of him, working my way down and just seeing how the colors are changing as I'm working my way down, rather than thinking of like fitting in an arm in the armpit and the chest, and then working your way down like that, but then also working across it too, doing the same thing where you're just seeing how it's getting a little bit more red right here, then a little bit more purple, lighting it up a little bit, darkening it up a little bit, and kind of abstracting everything, so you're just really seeing the light effect and the color effect rather than thinking about all the different parts of his anatomy. And then the fourth day, which I did Monday, I worked the whole thing. So I went back into the shadows. I made the shadows a bit more colorful, worked on the background. I think I darkened and brightened up certain areas of the background, and then obviously worked in the lights more to get those a little bit more solid. I was really trying to push the color more, which is one thing that I've been trying to work on, is pushing my color more. I also did a lot with the portrait. I spent a lot of time with the portrait actually trying to make it look like a human, because that was one thing that was really weak in this color study. I just couldn't get the portrait with like the small features of it and everything. but I'm a lot more happier with it. But anyway, so the day ended, or the model session ended, and then Matt came by and he was showing me how I could push the color more, and showing me that pushing the color in the shadows more can make the whole thing look more colorful. So for example, the shadow shape that's under the nose, he said that that's usually really extremely colorful. So he was showing me how I could be pushing more red into under the nose, and then also more red blending out from the nose into the light shape. That really brightened it up a whole bunch, or I made it more colorful, and making it more colorful brightened it up as well. And then if I remember right, he was also showing me doing the same thing with the hand, making sure that the hand was really colorful. So I definitely learned a lot with doing this color study, and I kind of want to do some more because it's a little bit more of a looser way of working, so you can experiment more with pushing the color more to make it look more naturalistic, but also not crazy like a rainbow figure either. So I definitely want to do more of these color studies. Tuesday, I started to work more on my long pose figure painting of Kevin. Now my painting is really, really dark. The week before we had a lot of dark days, and I darkened my painting to match that, but I overdid it so the painting looks really dark. So I know I needed to brighten all the values up. So what I did was I started in the shadows and corrected the shadow shapes, like the drawing of it, and then taking the relationship of the value of the shadows compared to the background, I ended up brightening up the background a bit. And then I worked from the shadows up into the lights, and I lightened up the lights, but what I did today wasn't, I don't think it was really efficient, and it didn't really brighten the painting up. I mean, it definitely brightened it up, but I don't think it made as big of an impact as I thought I was doing. But definitely brightening up the background helped, but everything else kind of not as much as I would have liked. So then on Wednesday, what I did that I think helped more is I started in the darkest halftones. I brightened those up by making them more colorful, and so making them look more colorful really did brighten that up, which made me have more room then to brighten up the lights. So in relationship, they all made sense with each other. And then I had more room then to also brighten up the background more. And with the background, I am running short on time because when I was in DC, I missed about a week of working on Kevin. Instead of brightening up the whole entire background to the edges of the painting, I'm really just working more around the figure. So this day I felt with brightening everything up, it was a more efficient day, and I think it was because instead of lightening things up just with white, which can get things to look chalky and not really how Kevin looks. So instead making things more colorful and still sticking with my mixtures, mostly at least in the dark halftones, my mixtures were black with a lot of yellow and a lot of red. So I am finding that the more colorful I push things, the brighter they appear. On Thursday, I pretty much just did the same thing where I kept making the halftones, or the darker halftones, more colorful. This time I focused more on the lower portion of Kevin, so his lower back and down his legs, and brightening up the background too around those areas, because on Wednesday I more focused up at the top part. So Thursday, just doing pretty much the same thing, just working down the painting. Friday, I looked at my painting and it still looked really dark to me, really, really dark. So what I did was, well, Matt is painting the same thing. He's painting Kevin. And so what I did was I took my painting and I put it underneath his, and I compared the two. And looking at Matt's painting and looking at mine, yes, mine was super dark compared to Matt's. And why did it look so dark? And I was seeing that I felt like I was really pushing the color before, but not compared to what Matt was doing. And also, I guess I was also pushing the color more in the darker halftones, but not in the shadows. And Matt's shadows were really, really colorful. So I put my painting back on my easel, and that day I started in the shadows and really brightened up the shadows by making them more colorful. So my shadow colors were black with a tiny bit of red, so I just did black with a lot more red in it. And putting it up there, at first it started to look weird and kind of crazy to have the colors be that colorful. But then what I did was then I worked in the darkest halftones and made that a lot more colorful. So it was a lot more red and yellow with a tiny bit of black mixed into it. And doing that, the shadow and the darkest halftone, getting those more colorful, I was able to then work up value-wise from that and work from the darkest halftones to the midtones and getting those to be more colorful. And then the lights, not as colorful, but like brighter up in value with more white into it. And that really helps my painting a whole lot, get this deadness out of it and really get it to look more naturalistic and a brighter painting. And also what I want to say is the shadows now, I've painted them so many times correcting the shadow shape of them, so there's quite a bit of, a nice layer of paint on it, a nice paint surface. And so putting the darker halftones and the blacks, or the shadows I mean, on it, it is such a nice paint surface to work on. I will just dip my brush in a little bit of medium and start to work a colorful shadow into the shadow that I already have down. And just how it goes on there is so nice. I don't know how to describe it. It'll lay down in predictable ways, but then also when some of the medium gets off my brush a little bit more and my brush becomes a little bit more dry with less paint on it, how the paint gets stuck to the surface is then goes to being unpredictable, how it's going to grab onto the canvas. And I don't know, it's really nice and surprising how different paint effects happen. And this is definitely one of my favorite stages then. I like when I start a painting and I'm doing that first wash. I love that. But then I love when I get to this stage where it's a really nice paint surface and then putting paint on top of that nice paint surface. It just feels so good and has such a nice look to it. Anyways, I also worked in the lights too, and I really made the lights a lot brighter in the shoulder areas. I don't know quite if I like how the shoulder areas look in the lights. It might look too pinkish and maybe too pasty. So I think just next week I'll ask Matt and Magda their opinion and see what I can do to correct it. And now for my cast. So my cast painting these past weeks, I feel like all I've done is kind of complain about it, how I feel like, oh, I'm stuck in this stage, I don't know what I'm doing, I feel like the work I put in isn't really being shown in the painting so much, and like I'm not making big differences in it. But this week was awesome. I feel like I'm really bringing it up into a new stage. It's starting to feel solid in areas. I have places that I can definitely hold on to and see where this painting's going, so I'm so excited about it. So what I did was I really focused on the main baby. So the baby that's in the middle, it's the second one to the right. So I repainted the head and the baby that's behind that, trying to make that main baby look like the focal point of the painting. Because on this baby, it's got the arms out really far, the leg is out the farthest. It just has the most dimension to it, so I really want to start showing that. And so I just worked pretty much down the baby, started in the head, went down into the arm, then the next day I worked on the legs, the next day I worked on the far leg. And I'm also not just working on that, stopping at the borders of that baby, but I'm working beyond it just a little bit, the areas around it, so I can make sure that like the arm will be out, but then the areas around it will look like it's behind it and more the background. Kind of like what I was just saying with the figure, that building up paint layers, it gets to a point where it's just such a nice surface to work on. And I feel like I'm really starting to get that now with this painting, at least in the focal baby. Mostly I'm working in the lights of the baby, and so working on the lights, I'm using thicker paint. And so putting those paint strokes down on a nice layer of paint already, it feels really sculptural, how I can just be laying paint on as I'm building the painting up and building the lights up. It's just like, I don't know how to describe it. It just feels like I'm almost working with clay or something. So to get the form to come out with lighter values, I'll just lay a thicker brush stroke down, thicker brush stroke down, thicker brush stroke down, and it really builds up this nice, I mean, it's an illusionary 3D effect, but I feel like it's also a literal 3D effect as well. And I don't really know how to describe it. It just feels really nice to paint on, and also to just keep building up on top of. Really excited to get to work on this next week and to keep spreading out from the focal point. I feel like the focal baby is pretty solid now. I can see a lot of space in the baby and around the baby. That's something really solid that I can hold on to and work out from now. One last thing, this doesn't have to do with my program at the Ravenswood Atelier. This is my own private studying, but something that I've always wanted to work on because it doesn't come naturally to me is drawing from my imagination. So I've had books that I've gone through. I talked about this one, memory drawing, and I've kind of put this down. I thought working on my image memory would help me with drawing from my imagination, but at least for me, this is not the case and it's not working that well. So what I actually read an article on the internet about how to draw from your imagination, and it was talking about you pick one thing that you want to really be able to do well, draw from your imagination. For me, that's figures. And it was saying that there's an active part and a passive part of your memory. And so you want to be working with the active part of your memory for drawing figures or anything else from your memory or your imagination. Active memory is understanding, for the figure examples, understanding the human body in a really three-dimensional way, so you can move it around in different poses and you wouldn't need to look up reference or anything. You just have a really good 3D understanding of the body. So what I started doing was I went through my old Bridgman books. So I have this one on life drawing that I'm going through, and I'm also comparing it to his constructive anatomy. So what Bridgman does really well is how he breaks down the body. So for movable parts, for example, he has the head, the rib cage, and then the pelvis. And those are in really simple blocks, so you can move those around pretty easily. And then he shows you how you can fill in the head and the rib cage and the pelvis into those blocks. So like this. So you can start off with the blocks, side angle, front and back view, and then shows you how you the anatomy fits into those. And this one goes into a lot more detail with how the muscles go over the skeleton. But I also don't want to stick with just Bridgman. Bridgman, I find, really exaggerates all the forms. So Vanderpool is another favorite of mine. Compared to Bridgman, Vanderpool is just a whole lot more subtle with how he shows the figures. Sometimes a little bit too subtle for my taste, so I think it's good to, here's an example of arms, so you can see he's a lot more subtle and not as exaggerated with showing the forms of the different muscles. But then not only that, so I'm looking through Bridgman and Vanderpool, but I'm also looking through a medical book too, so I'm just trying to get a big perspective on the body, because I feel like, well, every human body is different, the proportions are slightly different, so seeing 3 different ways of how people are constructing the body is just helpful for me to see a wide range. And so in my sketchbook, and this is what I've been working on over the weekend, just trying to work out different compositions and stuff. Ooh, this is an atlas painting that I'm working on. Oh, this is, my husband, he's a med student, and he was learning how to do something, so I asked him to draw me a picture of it, so that's what that is. But yeah, this is thinking about the human figure in these really simple, blocky, 3-dimensional way is really helping me to understand the body and being able to move it in space. I have a long way to go before I feel like I will be where I want from drawing from the figure from my imagination, but that's pretty much it. But I feel like this is really helping me. I've tried a lot of different methods and haven't gotten that much success with them. So I'm going to keep working on this, and I might give updates if it's going well and if I'm still finding it pretty useful.